A pleasant good evening, brothers and sisters. And it's a pleasure for us who are gathered here this evening in the Neville Hall Lecture Theatre, and also for those listening on YouTube. And we have to say thank God for YouTube. Half of our audience is actually on YouTube. It is good to be gathered in this common space once again to reason and to pay our respects to one of the Caribbean's finest scholar activists, Walter Rodney, and for us to hold a grounding. I know that there are several other ways that you and I could be spending this Friday evening. I know for me, I know what I'll be doing otherwise. But we are very much delighted and that you have chosen to spend this time with us in this 25th annual Walter Rodney Lecture under the theme, The Grounding with My People, Black Economic Development and Implications for Haiti. So let me use this opportunity again to welcome all to our grounding, specifically my colleagues here in the ICS and in the faculty. I see one of my fellow HODs, Dr. Vivette Milson-White. Welcome, Doc, and other colleagues from the history department and from the faculty and others. One person that read my book, so greetings. And also Dr. Barbara Hannah Blake, who will be helping us sometime next year. So I'll leave that one alone. But welcome all to this evening's grounding. Let me digress for a minute and to make a point. This summer, 8 of us from the faculty, we went to the Birmingham City University under the Erasmus Plus program. One of the highlights of our trip was a community meeting with the Caribbean community in Birmingham. It was an amazing evening. They placed 8 of us in the center of a theater, and we were made to feel like movie stars. Here were 8 Caribbean scholars, right, deep discussing our research and explaining the nature of our work, and the audience was thrilled. As one young lady said said to me at the end, in all of her tenure at a neighboring university, she never interacted with not even one black scholar. So to come and see 8 of us in one space gave her goosebumps. The first question, however, came from an elderly gentleman who was quiet and stoic for most of the time. He asked, and I'm going to paraphrase in my Jamaican vernacular, what do not do about Haiti? I am here to learn how we're going to fix Haiti's problems. Despite our satisfactory and varied responses, he was having none of it. I can't tell me how we're going to fix Haiti. So there are a number of teaching points in that loaded interaction, which we don't even have time this evening to actually unravel. But clearly understood the importance of the Haitian Revolution and its impact on Caribbean emancipation and development. But what further struck me was the link he made between academia and activism. So one of the questions I ask myself since that interaction is, what would Brother Walter Rodney say and do regarding the crisis in Haiti? It is for this reason we deliberately chose this topic, the groundings with my people, black economic development and implications for Haiti. We have also chosen deliberately our lecturer for this evening, Dr. Ajamu, who in many ways epitomizes the life and teachings of Walter Rodney. And if you know him, you know I'm speaking the truth. Right? He will be later introduced. I don't need to get into what his resume is like, but just to make the point that Dr. Ajamu is not only a scholar but an activist whose philosophy of black self-empowerment is a lived reality. As an activist university, it is our pleasure to engage in the discussion on black empowerment and its implications for the Haitian state. As cultural studies scholars, we are further reminded that cultural studies is activist in nature. So we at the ICS RSU will continue to play our part through lectures as well as through our course offerings to educate our students in the history and culture of the region. Some of our courses include Introduction to Caribbean Folk Philosophy, Caribbean Cultural Studies, the culture of Rastafari, culture, gender and sexuality in popular music, African religious retentions in the Caribbean, just to name a few. Our ICS pages, also on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, we will find more details about our programs. So as we commemorate this great academic and revolutionary Walter Rodney, let us remember his willingness to leave the comfort of the traditional classroom to the streets, gullies of communities such as Augustown, and to places such as what then was called Bakawal, to educate the masses on our history and our culture. This shows Rodney's genuine love for the working class community. Rodney understood the value of black lives and our empowerment. We highlight Rodney's humility and intelligence in the decision to identify with, sit and talk, educate and intermingle with the common people in expressing his revolutionary convictions. He desired to see his race uplifted to a place of dignity, caused him to share his knowledge on our rich African history and our culture. Let us reason therefore together this evening as we inform each other and search for solutions that can elevate our people in practical and achievable ways. Take care, brothers and sisters. One love. Take care.
Thank you, Dr. Goss. I was about to perform in the space of Renato, but I'll spare you the torture. So I'll just introduce my good friend. Dr. Ajamu Nangwaya is a class traitor who has responded to the call of our ancestors Amilcar Cabral and Walter Rodney for the revolutionary petty bourgeoisie element to commit class suicide and become one with the working class. Very much like Rodney, our speaker believes that it is possible and desirable to embrace the role of revolutionary intellectual by simultaneously creating and communicating theory and being involved in the practical work of emancipation. His class, race, and gender politics came out of his working class experience in Spanish Town and the North American Center of Imperialism. Ajamu holds a Ph.D. in adult education and community development from the University of Toronto, still in Babylon. He has taught at the post-secondary level in Canada and Jamaica. He was a cultural and Rastafari studies lecturer at the University of the West Indies Mona campus at the ICS before leaving the academic plantation for the countryside and rural economic development. Our speaker is now a worker member of the Mukasaka Farm and Eco Retreat in Westmoreland. Ajamu is an editor of 3 anthologies, with Adoa Honora and Anna Perkins, Rough Riding, Tanya Stevens, and The Power of Music to Change Society, with Kali Akuno, Jackson Rising, The Struggle for Economic Democracy and Black Self-Determination in Jackson, Mississippi, and finally, with Michael Tresello, Why Don't the Poor Rise Up? Organizing the 21st Century Resistance. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Dr. Ajamu.
Okay, so, good evening, comrades. And generally, I prefer to use comrades over sisters and brothers because when I talk to you as a comrade, my expectations of you are very high as opposed to our brother and sister because our friend, because of the deep emotional connections that we have with friends, sometimes we do not want to upset people. But if you're a comrade, and I have this expectation of you, and you have the same expectation of me, I expect you to fulfill it. I'm going to call you out. I don't care who you are. So I prefer comrades over friend or sisters and brothers, because sisters and brothers has that familial kinship connection that sometimes we tiptoe around things because I don't want to hurt feelings. But I will hurt your feelings as a comrade if you're not doing the right thing that we have agreed to do and we expect of each other. So when I say comrades, I'm not saying, oh, you guys are communists or socialists. I'm just saying, you being here at the annual Walter Rodney lecture suggests to me a type of commitment or curiosity about the life and work of Walter Rodney. So there's a higher level of expectation that I have than just for the regular person out on the road. Tonight, the presentation will be in the spirit of 1968. One of the things that we do not do when we celebrate the annual Walter Rodney lecture is make reference to the Rodney Rebellion of October 16, 1968. That is why we have the lecture in this week, because the 16th is the anniversary of the Rodney Rebellion. Some people wrongly refer to it as the Rodney Riot. A riot is when you have drunken hockey players in the National Hockey League in Canada or the United States being disappointed their team didn't make it out to the quarterfinals and the semifinals, and they turn over cars and burn a thing. That's riot. It has no social implication. That's why we don't call the Morant Bay Rebellion the Morant Bay Riot. The enemy, our class enemies, refer to it as riots because they want to take away the political significance of the rebellion. You know this, when you have imperialist politicians, presidents, prime ministers in North American Center of Imperialism, the European Center of Imperialism, referring to social disturbances that they don't like, they refer to it as riots. Those that they favor, they will call it social protests or social disturbances because they know you do not associate the term riot with something that is intensely political and social. So I do not refer to it as the Rodney riots. It is called the Rodney Rebellion. And I hope if you are calling the Rodney riot as of tonight, it will be the Rodney Rebellion because it was political in its implication and political in the forces and the motivation behind that uprising on October 16, 1968. But 1968 was a very significant year all over the world, even in the land of state capitalism. In Czechoslovakia, you had students rising up against the overbearing presence of the Soviet occupation. In the United States, you had the Martin Luther King rebellion, because he was assassinated in April. All over the world, young people, students were rising up. So 1968 is very, very significant. And if you go do the background research, you're like, wow, I didn't know all of these things took place in 1968. So we in the Caribbean was also part of that global upsurge in resistance and revolution. And many of us thought that, wow, we could actually change the world in that particular year, because we were at the high point where imperialism was on the defensive. We were engaging in social revolutions. We were engaging in anti-colonial rebellions in the colonized world, and imperialism was on its back foot, and we were pushing forward. So 1968 is like icing on the cream in terms of what we think we could have achieved. So whenever we talk about the annual Walter Rodney lecture, and we talk about Walter Rodney, we need to bring up the Rodney Rebellion and to discuss its implication. So, it's interesting. It coincides with the National Heroes celebration here in Jamaica. But what we need to do is to link the Rodney Rebellion to Nanny, to Sam Sharp, to Paul Bogle, to George William Garden, because they were also engaged in using emancipatory violence and emancipatory force against the forces of oppression. We need to make that link so that oppressed people understand that we have an inalienable right to use emancipatory violence in changing oppressive conditions. And people made us like, whoa, isn't that kind of radical? But it's not radical. We exist in a very violent capitalist society. Every year, as a result of structural violence, more people die from structural violence, denial to health care, denial to quality education, good working condition, decent wages. These are all acts of structural violence. Racism, sexism, homophobia, these experiences kill more people than people who die in wars annually. And that's why we use the term as a concept, structural violence, because what structural violence means is that the potential that we have and the actuality is where social violence is, because we have the resources globally, in many cases nationally, to meet adequately the needs of the working class, the sufferers, poor people, but we don't. So in that gap between the potential and the actual is structural violence, and it's a very deadly and wicked experience. So when we use emancipatory violence against oppressors, we are actually doing a good thing, and we should never give up that right to use force and to use violence to change oppression. And some people say, but Ajamu, you're big on Bob Marley. Bob Marley was a one love person. And I said, yes. But you remember in Talking Blues, him said, now that he realized that the preachers are lying, feel like bombing a church or booming a church, I was teaching a course on Bob Marley here, and when I talk about Bob Marley and violence, and I was using Fanon to explain a certain type of violence that are good, and then predatory violence of the system of capitalism, that's a bad type of violence. They were saying, but Bob Marley believed in peace and love. So I played Talking Blues, and it's like, for some of them have never heard of Talking Blues. Because, like North Americans, they know about One Love, You're Jamming, Three Little Birds, not the protest songs, the intensely political songs. So when I play Talking Blues, I talk about Bob Marley booming a church or bombing a church. They were like, that's Bob Marley? But then later in the song, when I said, who's going to stay at home, know that the freedom fighters are fighting? They're like, but I thought One Love was what Bob Marley was about. So okay, let's go over to Zimbabwe, the song. And we're saying, arm in arm, with arms, we're going to fight this little struggle. They're like, holy cow, I never heard that in the song, that he's talking about using guns for emancipatory purposes. So we should never give up that right. And that's one of the reasons why, while I was in the North American Center of Imperialism, I always opposed gun control. Gun control is a racist instrument coming out of slavery, where even for free Africans, they were denied ownership and access to guns. Even in Jamaica, as a working class, and when we talk about Haiti, we're going to make the link to why self-defense of the working class is a fundamental right. In the United States, the disarmament of Africans is a standing policy in the United States. The bourgeoisie don't have to have their personal firearms, and usually they do, like in Jamaica. You're in Beverly Hills, Cherry Gardens, and other places, you have your private firearm. But not only that, you have private security that can respond to you. And if there's an alarm, the state will send its police there to protect you. When we're in the ghetto, and one of decide that they're going to come and massacre a family, the police are not going to come. So the working class in every country must be in a position of being armed to protect ourselves collectively. We're not talking about predatory violence of the lumpen, criminalized lumpen elements. We're talking about working class people using their right to use force to protect their interests and to use it as an instrument of liberation. We can't get into this notion that we're not going to use violence. And that's what the Rodney Rebellion was about, that after 10 years of independence, the working class wasn't benefiting from independence. So after 6 years of independence, the working class in Jamaica was worse off than under colonialism. While they were talking about the great statistical improvements in terms of production and other things, we were falling in, there was higher level of income equality, higher unemployment among the working class. Violence was being enacted on our body, and all we did on October 16, 1968, was saying, we're not going to take this anymore. So we, the descendants of those people, and 3 people were martyred during the rebellion, we should recognize them in the same way we recognize the Morant Bay Rebellion, in the same way we talk about Taki using force to liberate themselves. We should celebrate that. And for me, as an educator, I use the platform of the classroom to talk about the things that you don't hear on talk radio, you don't hear at your dinner table, and in a lot of times you don't even hear in radical circles. So I glorify the use of force directed at overturning oppressive system. And that's the reason why Maoism, Jamaica's first African syncretic religion, was feared by the oppressor, because the Maoists believed in using violence to overthrow enslavement. So we don't talk about those political aspects of the Maoists, and that the syncretic religions that we have are also committed to social justice. We talk about the dancing, people get into trance, the communicating with the spirits, but we ignore the social political elements of these religions and the resistance tradition that they're contributing to. So for me, in celebrating the Rodney Rebellion, in pointing to it, is a way to say, look, we're not going to do business as usual. We're going to be as politically irreverent as we can be. And in celebrating our resistance tradition, we're giving a double one-finger salute to forces of oppression. There's nothing polite about us when it comes to opposing systems of oppression. We can't afford to be polite to an impolite system carrying out acts of structural violence on us. So today, we're linking 3 important issues: the grounding tradition, the quest for African economic empowerment, and normally I do not use the word black to refer to African people, because until my ancestral land is called black land, I'm going to take my name from the name of my land, and that's Africa, African. What's a black? Why are we calling ourselves black? But here in Jamaica, we refer to the Indian, the South Asian, as Indian, because when they came here, the territory they came from is called India. We call people Syrian or Lebanese, even though they weren't born there. We call people Indian, Chinese, but when it comes to the Africans call themselves black. Or they say, I'm just a Jamaican. That's all I know, Jamaican. So it's a conscious political decision to use the name African to refer to us as a people. There are times I was talking about African, and people say, yeah, but Ajamu, what about us as blacks? I'm saying, well, who do you think I'm talking about? If I'm talking about continental Africans, then I would say continental Africans. We were talking about Africans in diaspora and maybe Africans in specific context, and we say African, all you can think about is continental African. But today, as we look at what can a liberation economics be in the context of Jamaica, in the context of the African world, and look at Haiti's entanglement with imperialism, one of the things that must be very clear to us, and we have to follow in the tradition of our ancestor Audrey Lorde, is that the master's tool cannot be used to destroy the master's house. If we're talking about economics for liberation, it cannot be what Nixon famously referred to as black capitalism. It cannot be where we're saying, okay, yes, we need more Michael Lee Chins. No, we need less Michael Lee Chins in Jamaica. We need the working class, the true creators of wealth, to be in the driver's seat in establishing the decisions about how we plan economics and who benefit from it. No, we don't need another Michael Lee Chin unless we want to bring them out into the courtyard of justice to interact with the people. But other than that, we don't need economic parasites. That's what they are, the capitalists. They feed on the body of the people. And if we don't believe that, all we need to remember is during the COVID pandemic, when the governments across the world decided they're going to shut the economies down, the capitalists saying, hell no. Because the working class are the true wealth creators. If they don't work, we can't create wealth. All the capital, the billions that they had sitting down are in their banks. They cannot create wealth, the true wealth creators, the working class. They're saying, I don't care if 5% must be sacrificed. They got to go back to work so we can create wealth. So when we think of economic development, we have to move in a different direction. And as I mentioned earlier, Rodney was committed to an economics that is about ending class rule, ending the state as an instrument of power over the people, and he was committed to the self-organization of the working class. And by self-organization, it means that the working class are the strategic decision makers about every single thing that takes place in the country or on a territory. That is different from anything that we have experienced in the modern period. Rodney was truly a revolutionary. Today we would think it's kind of utopic for people to think of a world without a state. And we tend to forget that the state is actually a young human institution. We existed, for centuries in statelessness, and we self-govern societies. Some societies didn't have they didn't have the true self-governance in place because they, pushed towards hierarchical structures. But we have examples like among the Igbo, the Balante in Guinea-Bissau, the Nuer in Sudan, where they exist in large numbers and they didn't develop a state. Where they had, women may have been excluded in some of those situations, but the process that had in place was, with the inclusion of women would have been a pure example of self-organization of all the people and adults in the society. So when we talk about Rodney, this great organic intellectual, we're talking about someone who was seeking fundamental change. So tonight, we are obligated to think of revolutionary possibilities. And I know that to talk about revolution, some people may think, oh, man, I feel like I'm caught in a time warp. Here's somebody talking about revolution. But remember, the great organic intellectual and folk philosopher, Bob Marley, said that it takes a revolution to make a solution. That's what Bob said, and we love to praise Bob Marley and say, oh, he's the greatest, he's a prophet. But we tend to forget the prophetic part of Rodney, following the Old Testament prophetic tradition, where him does fire burn. That's what Bob Marley is saying. It takes a revolution to make a solution. It's not outdated for us to think in revolutionary possibilities, because the fact that we're thinking about Haiti in this lecture, we cannot think of Haiti without thinking of revolution. That Haiti was one of the great revolutions of their period. When we look at the English Revolution or the French Revolution and the American Revolution, the Haitian Revolution was the most advanced of all the revolutions, because of all of these revolutions, Haiti was the only one that said that anywhere in the world you're at, and you come to Haiti and you're enslaved, you're free. The English Revolution wasn't about emancipation of the enslaved. The French Revolution was, for a time, they abolished slavery, but Napoleon restored it. And definitely American Revolution was not about enslaved. So when we think about Haiti and we think about the great revolutions of that period, we have to look at the qualitative difference of Haiti. Haiti was also the only revolution who decided that we're going to commit our resources for the independence of Latin America. The French Revolution didn't do that. The American Revolution didn't do that. The English Revolution did that. So that's why Haiti is so important today as a symbol and also as an example of a nation of people, an enslaved nation that used emancipatory violence to free themselves. They don't want Haiti to be a positive lesson to us, but we do not have to follow their example. We can see Haiti differently from our class enemies, from the master, because we always see things differently. The settlers see things differently from those of us, in the quarters of the natives. We will see things in a much different way. Tonight, I'm going to refer to another Caribbean revolutionary, Frantz Fanon. And he has a very important quote that he said, "Each generation must out of relative obscurity discover its mission, fulfill it or betray it." Each generation must out of relative obscurity discover its mission, fulfill it or betray it. And I'm saying today, in this period of this wicked neoliberal capitalist turn, our commitment must be to fulfilling our mission. And our mission is liberation. If we don't exist for liberation, and we're talking liberation on all fronts, because we can't talk about liberation and say, oh, I'm only for liberation on the basis of race, or on gender, or on class. I'm also talking about liberation of people who we see as minority sexualities, the LGBTQ. We must also commit to the liberation of women. So we must commit ourselves to revolutionary feminism. And if you see African people, racialized people being oppressed, and you're not committed to that liberation, you're taking up space. You're betraying your mission. And that's how we should look at it. There's no two ways about it. They create some little liberal space where you can, I'm kind of sitting on the fence and, no. There's only two ways. Because you see, when I dream, I don't dream in Technicolor. I dream in black and white. So that's when I talked earlier about the obligations that I have of comrades and my expectations. Because I don't, it's nice little multicolored world. No, it's black and it's white, it's right or it's wrong. When it comes to the question of liberation, that's how I look at it. See, the hopeful period of the 1960s and 1970s with its decolonization, national liberation struggles, and social movements made many elders believe that they would experience liberation in their own time. It was a very heady period that when we're reading about oral history accounts of people really believed that they were going to change the world, they could change the world. And we also had the same experience here in the Caribbean. And this type of radical Caribbean tradition is something we must amplify. For those of us who are educators, we have to bring that to the fore in a classroom. Because one of the things that I've noticed, just being someone who has been on the academic plantation, and in some ways, I would see myself as a lifer on the academic plantation. Because it's almost like I have severed my connection to it, because I see this space as a very important space, a space where we can generate or facilitate critical consciousness. We can engage, we can encourage learners, students, and ourselves to think of revolutionary possibilities. I am not giving up on the academic plantation because I've seen experiences with students coming in a classroom not being aware of certain type of the expansiveness of oppression, and when the light went off in their heads, you just say, yes, if we can find space for them once they leave the academic plantation, these can become committed workers for emancipation in social movements. This is a space that we shouldn't give up on. But what we're experiencing now is a kind of dulling of vision. And even the book of the colonizer says, for want of a vision, the people shall perish. Under this new phase of society, the neoliberal capitalist turn, we know have grand visions. We compromise and compromise and compromise and back away from the grand vision that we have to take the little scraps from the table of the master. Because we don't believe we can own the bakery and decide that, we don't need to eat bread. We're going to eat bulla. We're going to make toto. Why do we have to eat bread? We don't have to eat bread. There are other things that we can eat. But that can only happen when we control and manage the bakery as the people who create the world, as the workers, the working class, the sufferers, the people. But today, we have what we're experiencing is a retreat from collective mission, collective goals. So when Frantz Fanon talks about discovering our mission, fulfill it or betray it, The mission is now so small that we have to use, it's so microscopic that we can't see it. So we take the crumbs that we are getting. But I'm saying we have the opportunity to move away from that. And hopefully at the end of the lecture, you can agree that this is not it, what we have here, where we're attacking public services, social programs, rights for workers, moving back on regulation of capitalist corporations and their quest to destroy human life and also natural life. All of these, when we talk about neoliberal turn in capitalism, these are the regressive things that are going on. And we're not looking at the compromise between capital and labor after World War II in the imperialist countries, where in order for social peace, they provided extensive social programs to kind of tamp down on revolutionary fervor. We're talking about seeking justice as a pure goal that we're working towards, not the compromise state that we're in under neoliberal capitalism. I believe that we can do better, we can be better, and we should not strive to accept the world as it is. And that's the reason why some of us will say, well, the problem with capitalist society is that African people are not fully integrated into it. We need our Warren Buffett. We need all the great men of capital so that they can create economic development for us. But all we need to do as someone with experience, lived experience in the North American center of imperialism, capitalism is not working there for the majority of white people. They're actually suffering. I've taught white students who were saying they were the first one to go to college, and I was in the college system. And I was just like, to go to college, we're in the 2000s, and you're the first one coming to college. When they write about in the journal about your life, you would think you're talking about an indigenous American or indigenous Canadian or racialized people, talking about the oppressive condition that they experience in Canadian society. But these are white students, white working class students, experiencing life. They're students when, I'm talking about what class identity. And usually when you ask students what's their class identity, they usually say they're middle class. And I tell them to go home and ask your parents what class you're from. The parents say, we're working class. And they say, well, okay, but we afford this, this, and that. They say, yeah, because we didn't pay the light bill, so that you can be in 3 or 4 organized activities. We give these things to you, but you don't know the reality of the budget in this household. We are poor. We're not middle class. And that's why I'm saying that we have to use the opportunity here to talk about class reality, oppressive condition. Capitalism is not a possibility for us. And that's why, and when I dwell on that, it's for a reason. Here in Jamaica, across the Caribbean, Anglophone Caribbean, we have a reparations movement. And here on the academic plantation at UWI, we have people here who are directing that program. These people put racism on trial, but not capitalism that brought us into slavery. And capitalism that continued to exploit us to this very day. Because these are petty bourgeois elements who are benefiting from capitalism, and all they want to do is for the privilege among Africans to get access to these development resources in the form of reparation payment so they can compete effectively with white capitalists, Lebanese capitalists, Indian capitalists, Chinese capitalists, because the Africans as capitalists are way behind the other racialized groups here. They don't care about us. They're just using reparation to advance their class interests. Because otherwise, how is it Walter Rodney in How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, he talks about slavery being capitalism being the motivating factor behind the enslavement of Africans. Eric Williams in Capitalism and Slavery said the same thing. C.L.R. James in the Black Jacobins talk about capitalism being the major force. How do we arrive on racism? They were talking about reparations and no discussion about the system that brought us into slavery. Why? Why would we do that? What is it about capitalism that we're afraid to speak its name in public? Some will say, all the elders would say, oh, don't call the Lord's name in vain. You cannot call capitalism, because these are privileged actors. And if they come here, I will say to them that you're leading the reparations movement in a politically misguided way. And if you think it's wrong, let's go on a public forum so that people can hear what's going on. So we have to give a strong emphasis to capitalism and its role in our continuing oppression. Everything that we talk about today when it comes to oppression, capitalism is very much embedded in it. So even when we experienced chattel slavery and went over to wage slavery, again, it was the wage slavery of capitalism. We're still experiencing that today here in the Caribbean. So we're coming to the issues of groundings with the people. And what is this issue? And the question of not focusing on capitalism, it can be coming from a number of places. One, it could be that we're experiencing mental slavery. So, what's his name? Gramsci would say it's hegemony, that we're looking at society through the lens of the ruling class. Garvey and Bob Marley call it mental slavery. Marx would call it false consciousness, that we have the illusion that the system can benefit us and we're a part of it. It's just that there are some unfortunate barriers that we need to get out of the way so that we can become full participants. So it's mental slavery, we're experiencing hegemony, or we are just a victim of false consciousness. So it can be mental slavery that have us not interrogating class and capitalism. It can also be the class interests that are being pursued. So we want integration into capitalism as petty bourgeois and bourgeois elements, so we're not going to put capitalism on trial. Or it could have simply been that we're ideologically underdeveloped. We don't have that ability to read correctly society. We can read the word, we're literate, but we can't, as Paulo Freire would say, we cannot read the world, just the word. So even in Jamaica, we're talking about dunceness. At one level of dunceness is that we can't read the word. But at the other level of dunceness, which the petty bourgeois and bourgeois elements will experience, you can't read the world. You cannot understand the economic, social, and political relationships that are responsible for the oppressive condition faced by the majority of us in Jamaican society, in Caribbean society, in the North American and European centers of imperialism. So Rastafari, with its concept and practice of groundings, was able to challenge the mental slavery, the false consciousness that we have about society. And that's why Rodney is very significant in how he elevated the concept of grounding. But again, I want to make reference to Bob Marley. And in the song One Drop, he states, and then you give us the teaching of His Majesty, for we no want no devil philosophy. If we take the teaching of His Majesty as a metaphor for knowledges of liberation, Marley was telling us that we must develop oppositional ideology. So some people here, give us the teachings of His Majesty. We don't want the devil philosophy, but even for me, devil philosophy means our class enemies, the oppressors, the ruling class represent the devil. And again, the devil is a metaphor. And for me, understand, what Rastafari is saying in terms of His Majesty. We're talking about Emperor Haile Selassie when we talk about His Majesty, but I'm looking at devil's philosophy as a metaphor and looking at His Majesty's philosophy. So, as an organic intellectual, trod in the path of Rastafari, Marley was schooled. Marley was schooled in an alternative philosophy through the participatory, collective, pedagogical practice of groundings. The educational space of groundings critically examines issues before it to determine its relevance to the liberation thrust of Rastafari, in particular, and Africans and African sufferers in general. Groundings is an active process of emancipating the participants from mental slavery by throwing the devil's philosophy of internalized racism, class oppression, and ecological degradation into the cesspool of history. That's the only proper residence for the devil's philosophy, is a cesspool of history. We don't want it among us, to pollute the presence of people striving for justice, striving to create the good society. And that's how we should see it. There's no neutrality for us. And that's why Rastafari was very frightening to a lot of people, because Rastafari were like the living embodiment of the Old Testament prophet. The Old Testament prophets are popular with us now. It's almost like Muhammad Ali, when he couldn't articulate as much, we all love him because he can't say things to disturb us. The Old Testament prophets are dead, so they can't make us uncomfortable, because the Old Testament prophets, they spoke truth to power and the powerless. Not just speaking truth to power, because even the oppressed are in need of truth-telling about what they're doing or not doing. Yeah, they're popular with us now. And most of us, like Marley, Peter Tosh, they're popular after death, because we can selectively talk about certain things about them and then don't talk about other things, and it makes us feel comfortable. But no, with Rastafari and groundings, they have to come and intervene and say uncomfortable things. With Rodney testifies to the critical consciousness engendered through groundings, and this was based on his experience in grounding session. And it was taken from one of his essays in the groundings with my brothers. And today, if Rodney had to put a title together, he wouldn't say the groundings with my brother. He would say the groundings with my comrades or sisters and brothers, because he would have a better understanding of gender politics and would have committed himself to the emancipation of women. So we can make that correction for Rodney, because we're saying, no, we are also feminists, and feminism is a good word. We're not talking about liberal feminism. Liberal feminism allied itself with the capitalist class enemy. We're talking about revolutionary feminism of Claudia Jones, Angela Davis, Bell Hooks, women who were committed to use the knowledge, skills, and attitude that they have to construct a just society for all. We're not talking about exclusionary feminism, which was liberal feminism is. I fireburn liberal feminism, but I'm committed to revolutionary feminism that is about emancipation of women first and foremost, but it's the emancipation of humanity as a total project. This was what Rodney had to say about groundings. And above all, I would like to indicate my own gratification for that experience, which I shared with them, because I learned, I got knowledge from them, real knowledge. You have to speak to the Jamaican Rasta, and you have to listen to him. And remember, again, said women, because even though groundings is a liberatory space, women weren't full participants in that experience. So we have to engage in what we call the dialectics. We can see Rastafari grounding as a revolutionary breakthrough and a space for critical consciousness, but we can look and see who are fully participating and who are not. And the gender politics is there. So even Rodney revealed that in terms of he talking about listening to him. I'm said, you have to listen to him. Listen carefully, and you will hear him tell you about the word in W capitalized. And then you listen to him and go back and read Muntu, an academic text, and you read about Nomo, an African concept for word, and you say, goodness, the Rastas know this. And they knew it before Jan, an academic research in African culture. You have to listen to them and hear them talk about the cosmetic power, and it rings a bell. And I say, but I've read this somewhere. This is Africa. You have to listen to their drums to get the message of the cosmic power. And when you get that, no, you get humility, because look who you're learning from. The system says that they have nothing. They are the illiterates. They are the dark people of Jamaica. But this is what the power of groundings, that space for critical consciousness, that space for us to work on our commitment to the devil's philosophy, or class enemy's philosophy. And when I say class enemy, even Warren Buffett reminds us that, wow, there's a class war taking place in society. Go and quote it. Go and look for it. Don't believe Ajamu. Because you may say, okay, Ajamu, you're just being a propagandist right now. You're a shameless propagandist. Warren Buffett said that there's a class war going on in society, and my class is waging a class war, and we're winning it. And he wasn't gloating. He was telling the members of his class that we can't be taking away resources through social programs from the poor. It will bring a great disaster. He was warning the members of his class. He hasn't come out since, because I guess when he went back to the fraternity, they said, we are telling them where I'm going, you know? That's what probably he said to them, because, of course, Warren Buffett doesn't come out with this message sound like he's some revolutionary. But he's telling us, as a capitalist, that there's a class war going on. A class war being waged against us. But you see, in the absence of class consciousness, we don't see it as just some evil people doing things. But no, it's the nature of the system. It's structured into the operation of the system for them to deny our humanity, for them to provide the resources so we can experience self-actualization, liberation. It's nothing personal. It's strictly political. So when I say that I can take my class enemies out into the court of justice, it's nothing personal. You may be a good guy or a good gal to sit and drink beer or drink soursop juice, since I don't drink alcohol. But when it comes to the business of liberation and I take you out in the courtyard of justice, I am deliberating as the people expect me to deliberate. And we will pronounce justice where justice must be pronounced. And whatever the rules are, the rules will be applied. It's not personal. As Coach Deion Sanders, Coach Prime would say, it's personal. If you guys are following North American football and what Deion Sanders, Coach Prime is doing, we must pay attention to sports because it also brings out great drama. That's why CLR James talk about cricket, and talk about cricket in a way where you're thinking, well, that sounds like politics. When we see sports, whether it's the Jamaican athletes, don't just see it as sports. See them as metaphor for possibilities and what's going on. Read them in political ways. So I said to revolutionary, because people said, oh, Jam, I didn't know you're into sports. I said, no, I don't watch the games. I just I more look at the sociology of sports, the political events behind what you see as us. Sports. You have to see beyond the shadows. So, with Rodney, he was not exaggerating the profound nature of the reasons that take place in groundings in which he participated. I've taken students while I was here at UWI teaching Rastafari studies and cultural studies. We went on field trips to Nyabingi gatherings. We also went to School of Vision Commune in the Blue Mountains. And I'm telling you, the experience, the learning experience of these students was very profound. And they were always saying, but they are uneducated, they're just regular people, and how do they know these things? They didn't go to no university, how did they know these things? And we don't know these things, and yet we are the ones that they're trained to be scholars, and we've never heard of these things. How do they know? And many of them end up questioning things about their being, but the problem is that we don't have radical space in the community that when students become conscientized, we can bring them into social movements so they can become even more radicalized in their commitment to justice. So they live conventional lives and just carry on like their parents. And the parents were saying, you know what, I'm too old. I'm kicking the football to my children, and they will carry on the struggle. But the children, under the weight of student loans, they can't be radical. And then they go and have children. That further push them away from radicalism. Because if they go to prison, who's going to take care of these children? So when the capitalists on the neo-capitalist turn is attacking social programs, there is also a political agenda behind it, because it means that we won't take risks for political reasons. Because people are going to suffer. If you, as a revolutionary, go to prison and you have adequately funded social programs where your income is not missed, because we as a collective provide the income so that all members of society can go to good school, they can go to recreational programs and have to dip in their pocket. We adequately fund the needs of the people. It means that more of us could commit ourselves to revolution, because the people who are depending on us won't suffer from our political involvement. So these things are real, but the students really find the groundings with Rastafari very important. And even for myself, my love of African liberation, my love of Africa came out of being around Rastas, going to vineyard, and even my commitment to organic agriculture, that I walk off the academic plantation to go into the bush. One guy in Westmoreland said, "You must be mad. You leave UWI to go in the bush to farm?" And I'm saying, in the fullness of time, people will see why I did it. But all of that is the effect of Rastafari changing my consciousness about radical possibilities. My commitment to vegetarian lifestyle came from Rastafari. Because as a youth, being in Spanish Town, we had access to teachers in our community. So they were teaching us things outside of school. And as a little youth, it's like later on I'm confirming these things that they were saying, and I'm thinking, how did they know it? Or sometimes you have Rastas in our community, and they're reasoning about things that Rastas are reasoning about elsewhere. And we're saying, but how did this become national? You're here in Spanish Town, but you're reasoning on something that's also been said in St. James, been said in St. Thomas, been said in Westmoreland, and you don't have a national radio. But again, we know, we understand that one Rasta will go to a Rasta camp, spend 3 days, a week, and then come back. That's not documented in the history. It's documented at a general level when people interviewing people and they talk about the circulation of ideas and the circulation of people in camps, and they're bringing ideas. So they had a way to, replenish, to reframe ideas. So groundings is very, very important as an educational tool. And we should look at grounding as a popular education space, wherein you have the questioning, interrogation of the bourgeois ideologies that are offered to us. And the thing about groundings, why it's so important, it's 24/7, it's ongoing, because the devil's philosophy is before us 24/7. So Rastafari must counter it. But what we need to do is to move beyond us merely educating, because a lot of people that I see in Jamaica, and I'm kind of disappointed, because to me, I'm a product of the 1970s and the politicization. So going to North American Center of Imperialism and coming back here 30 years later, I'm like, we have regressed politically. What's going on? Why are we moving backward politically than in the 1970s or even the mid-80s? Even the Communist Party abolished itself. Capitalism didn't abolish itself. That to show you the political backwardness in the society. When a Communist Party can say we have fulfilled our mission. What mission? Mission is to destroy capitalism. How are you abolishing yourself? So, who are going to be in the forefront of interrogating capitalism on a daily basis? So, but we have to move beyond that. If we're engaging with groundings with people, it's critically important for us to look at education for critical consciousness as one element in the oppositional practice of rejecting the devil's philosophy. The preceding stance in the essay, African History in the Service of Black Revolution, that Rodney gave at the Black Writers Congress in Montreal in 1968, and it's after that conference that he was declared persona non grata. He couldn't come back to Jamaica. And this is what Rodney had to say on the question of critical consciousness, being conscientized, or what they're saying today, being woke, is not enough. He's saying the acquired knowledge of African history must be seen as directly relevant, but secondary to the concrete tactics and strategy which are necessary for our liberation. There must be no false distinction between reflection and action, because the conquest of power is our immediate goal. It's not just be conscientized and going around and say, oh yeah, I'm conscious, I'm woke. We must not make the false distinction between reflection and action, because the conquest of power is our immediate goal. And the African population at home and abroad is already in combat on a number of fronts. Rodney is calling for the marriage of education for critical consciousness with the practical actions needed to destroy the power of our class enemies. And they are enemies. They see us as our class enemies. We may just say, oh, but God so must love everybody. That will get you into trouble, into deep doo-doo. If you go around this idea that, we are not going to have a proper perspective on our class enemy, because they are committed to our destruction. Why do you think we have educational apartheid here in Jamaica? The resources are here that we can ensure that we have access to decent education. There are only about 30 top secondary schools in this country. And of course, because some of us from the working class are able to go to them, we think, oh yeah, but you won the lottery to go to Woolmer's and go to other schools. So, it's fair for all. But the thing is that the bourgeoisie don't send its children, send their children to Papine High School. We call it Papine High School, but we know it's a secondary school. It gives a name change. But the content is still the same. That's where we warehouse poor people's children. Spanish Town Secondary. When I was going there, I used to call it Ketchman College. So no, it's now Spanish Town High School, but it's still the school for the working class. I had to escape it. And escape it to Tivoli Gardens Comprehensive, because at least I had a small academic program preparing people for O levels. And when I went to Woolmer's, I'm like, what the hell is this? The expectations are so much higher at Woolmer's, because that's where you prepare the bourgeoisie to rule society. And then you bring working class children into it, and you change their consciousness, let them identify with the master, because they become part of the petty bourgeois class, and their class interest now is aligned with that of the bourgeoisie. So there's no accident when they deny us access to the resources that we need to survive. So when we refer to the class enemy, and Warren Buffett would probably agree with me because I said there is a class war going on. And if there's a class war, I mean there are enemies at war. And my class is waging it and winning the class war. This is a serious thing. That's why Rodney is committed to a different class reality. So we must see the need for critical consciousness wedded to practical action as necessary for us to move the struggle forward. And in order for us to do that, we must embrace the organizing approach to resistance. Kwame Ture, you may popularly known, or more known as Stokely Carmichael, was a person who made that clear to me what organizing and mobilizing is in terms of approach to resistance. What we saw with the Black Lives Matter movement, that's mobilizing. You bring out the people, and again, the movement is controlled by the leaders. They are the ones who use the people, the masses in demonstration as extras, as props in the struggle. And again, that type of method of resistance is episodic. So when somebody gets shot, you rise up. Petered out, you just go back and sit down. That is mobilizing. And a lot of times when we have these upsurge, and I'm critiquing it and say that mobilizing will not get us to where we need to go, because the enemy knows that just make a few reform, just accommodate them, because they will soon go back and to the conventional things that they're doing. Organizing is a different thing. And it's for that reason why I'm saying we need to embrace an organizing method of resistance. Or some of the features of the organizing approach to resistance are the people are the drivers of social change. People function in membership-based organization. The struggle is continuous and not episodic, as we find on the mobilizing method of resistance. And we also have capacity building programs. Because at one level, groundings is about capacity, but it's more ideological reconditioning, the rejection of the devil's philosophy. But it doesn't necessarily provide you with the knowledge, the skills, and the attitude that you need to do the practical work of struggles. How do we go in a community suffering unemployment and create worker-owned businesses? How do we build consumer cooperatives in communities so the businesses are not for profit making, it's about meeting the needs of the people. We need the knowledge and skills and attitude to organize those things. So under the organizing approach, capacity building is a central element, a central feature of this approach. And also with the organizing approach, we create programs, projects, and institutions through which we can live our lives. It's very UN agencies and Caribbean agencies put together a research project, and they found that, coming out of the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, that 66% of Caribbean people, 66% of Jamaicans cannot afford a healthy diet. And it was 57% for 22 Caribbean countries, the Anglophone countries and the Dutch-speaking territories. 57%, but Jamaica was worse. 66% of us cannot afford a healthy diet. But we go around and we see backyards uncultivated, space that you can cultivate. We see unoccupied spaces in a community. You'll see in a country, even country people are not planting fruits and vegetables. They benefit from the legacy trees planted by grandparents and great-grandparents. What we need now is for the revolutionaries to go among the people and start to raise their consciousness and have the skills where we can organize the people to start to provide food. Because we can use the space of food provision to raise their consciousness about the features in society, the structural features in society that prevent us from getting adequate diet. Housing is the same thing. If we're organizing the people for housing, we're saying housing shouldn't be a commodity. Let's build cooperative housing where it's owned by the group and managed by the group. So you don't say, this is my house, this is our house. So we're moving away from the capitalist model of housing as a commodity. We need an organizing method to provide us with the skills that we can go and organize people in that way. So the organizing method of resistance is where we should be going. It's fundamentally important. And for that to happen, we have to start joining organizations that are committed to social change. Like, where are these radical organizations in Jamaica, in the Caribbean, in the African world that's talking about revolutionary possibilities in the spirit of 1968? We need membership-based organizations because, as I mentioned, the organizing approach looks at the people as the driver of change. And earlier, when I was introducing the lecture and talking about Rodney, and I mentioned the Communist Creed that says, we are for the administration of things and not the government or governance of people. It means that we have to get together and administer our common affairs and not govern people. We're free beings. But we collectively organize, whether it's schools, whether it's how to protect the common environment, the ecological space that we're in, whether it's to conscientize people, protect our children, or provide recreational programs. You're not governing people. We're simply administering our common affairs. So the organizing approach is almost anticipating, or what we call the prefigurative politics of liberation, is that we're starting to live in a way that we would live in the free society. We start to adapt the values. And again, it won't be the pure form that will exist in the just society, in the good society. It will be compromised because we're in the institutional environment of capitalism, and some of the things we're doing are governed by the laws. And if we don't have the force in place to win concessions from the state to open up the space, oftentimes we may have to operate under their rules, which may compromise the purity of our vision. But nonetheless, we're starting to model our politics here in the oppressive order, so that when it comes to achieving revolution, we will already have years of experience of the just society. So that is when we talk about prefigurative politics of liberation. We're building the road as we travel. We are modeling what we will be doing in the just and free society, and it is possible. It is possible for us to do that, but it's going to happen through struggle. So Groundings all fit into that because groundings is a space for wiping away mental slavery, false consciousness, the hegemonic domination of the ruling class at an ideological plane. But we need organizing now to deal with the practical tactics and strategy of revolution making. And that's, and Rodney was very astute in recognizing that as much as he's praising groundings, but you still need strategy and tactics to actualize the alternative to the devil's philosophy and the devil's society. And again, devil is metaphor. Okay, I'm going to quickly talk about the African economic empowerment. Economics is very important, and as I've been interrogating capitalism, capitalism is a non-starter. It is not working even in the North American and European center of imperialism. All you need to do is to go and live there, and all the illusion that we have, where people want to run away from the Caribbean and go and sequester themselves in the centers of imperialism, would be washed away. We realize that, you know, as Hobbes would say, life is solitary, nasty, brutish, and short in these capitalist societies. But when we compare condition there to condition here, I don't fault working class people for wanting to escape. You're not going to see the Issas or Sanders, Mughal, Adam Stewart running away to live, or Michael Licini make his fortune in Canada and now he's coming here. They are not going to leave this paradise because they have the class power to live better lives. It's the middle class, petty bourgeois elements who are struggling here, and working class people who are running away to go to the centers of imperialism. The struggle that we are waging, we can put an end to the brain drain of working class people going away. And sometimes I even wonder, why do we even spend money on post-secondary education when we're going to lose about 70% of our people within 5 to 7 years migrating with what we have taught them? Within 5 to 7 years. We have the highest rate of brain drain in the world here in the Caribbean. And you wonder why these societies haven't collapsed with such a level of brain drain. But if we fix the economics in a different approach, and I'm advancing here that cooperative economics is the way forward as a transitional program. One program that we don't talk about was the worker self-management of the sugar industry, sugarcane sector of the sugar industry in Jamaica and the Michael Manley. Even within Manley's administration, the bourgeois forces within it didn't like the idea of working class Africans owning such a strategic part of the economy, even though it was the cane field cultivation, not the processing and manufacturing of the sugar. They didn't like that idea, and they undermined the program. So by 1981, Siaga came in and destroyed. But the people who studied are people from overseas. There are 2 books I have in my library on the sugar worker cooperatives, and it's done by people from abroad. They see the significance of workers owning, controlling, and managing their workplace. That is where we need to go. It's not to train our people to go and work for class enemies in these capitalist corporations, but it's we saying that labor is a creator of wealth. The only creator of wealth is labor. Because even the tractor, the excavator, labor had to go get iron ore and transform it in order for it to work. People are always saying, "Oh, you're saying labor is a source of wealth making," and they're saying, "What about technology?" Okay, labor creates technology, and we're talking about labor, mental and physical labor, because that's labor. Everything they come in and say, what about these factors of production? Labor transformed. And the trees may be out there, but labor must apply itself. Cut down the trees, process them. You have lumber, and we can build houses, we can do other things. Labor is the source of wealth creation in class society or capitalist society. So we need to engage in that. In cooperative economics, and it is possible for us, the working class, to own the means of production. Many of us here criticize capitalist banks and see them as blood-sucking vampires. But guess what we do? We go and take out accounts in these capitalist banks. And the credit unions are there. But we go to the capitalist banks. The type of transactions that we're doing can be covered by a credit union. And credit union can become dense network if more of us are in them so we can get access to ATM, anywhere you go, you will have access to them. We should strive to destroy the capitalist banks because credit unions came out of the class struggle against capitalist banks. In Italy and Germany, we had two different types of cooperatives, one for urban workers, one for rural workers, and it was to challenge capitalist domination of economics. Haiti. So, we can use the Q&A to talk about the alternative economics, but I'm saying that the capital exists to finance worker-owned business. There's consumer cooperatives like supermarkets, insurance companies, because we are already taking our capital and giving it to the capitalist banks, and the capitalist banks loan the money to our class enemies. Credit unions are financial cooperatives owned and controlled by the members. We go and we put the capital in it, and we make sure if the legislative framework is not adequate for them to fund business at a certain level, in our social movements, we fight the capitalist state to create the regulatory environment so credit unions can compete with capitalist banks and serve this cause of revolution. It's about vision. Again, even the enemy tells us through their Bible that for want of vision, the people shall perish. So we know that possible. But Haiti, they want Haiti to be a perpetual basket case. The pretext that they're using for wanting to occupy Haiti is that the criminalized lumpen elements have made Haiti ungovernable. If the working class, if we arm the working class, and we don't ask the capitals to arm us, we can acquire the means to protect ourselves. We can take on the criminalized lumpen element, and the same thing can happen in Jamaica because the criminalized lumpen elements live in working class community. But our struggle must be at a higher level of organization to sustain the arming of the working class. And the arming of the working class can mean legal firearms, where we push the capitalist state to make it possible for working class people, poor people to acquire firearms. And we can organize self-defense programs in our community so we can take on the armed criminal lumpen element who tend to undermine working class struggles because they create fear in our communities. The criminalized lumpen are almost like they're tools of the working class. They're not our friends. We shouldn't be afraid of them because we're more than them. And the same thing in Haiti. The arming of the working class could take care of these things, but some of the gangsters in Haiti are also linked to bourgeois elements within national politics. So, what we find is a fight going on between members of the bourgeoisie there. Political bourgeoisie, economic bourgeoisie, jockeying for power. It has nothing to do with the working class. But Haiti, we have to serve because we have to find a way. And I say part of the way will come from the economics that we're developing, because if we develop a dense network of worker self-management, consumer cooperatives, and see it as a part of the class struggle against capitalism, it is, as Rodney said in the paper on the question of disengaging imperialism, that when we engage in cooperative economics, it is a way of disengaging from imperialism. So when at the national level, when we start to challenge on the economic front, through worker cooperatives, through consumer cooperatives, through economics that's about meeting the needs of the people and not meeting the needs of the capitalist class, we are disengaging from capitalism. And at an international level, we're also disengaging from imperialism and challenging it. And we will have the resources to have the implements of freedom. Because as Bob Marley said in War and Smell of Glass Comment, that arm in arm with arms, we're going to fight this bitter struggle. We didn't sit around during slavery and say that, oh, why you people be so bad to us? We took arms in Jamaica in 1831, and we're saying that we're going on a general strike. We'll not work a day after the Christmas holiday break, and we gave birth to the Emancipation Rebellion. Some people call it Sam Sharp Rebellion, but we should call it the Emancipation Rebellion, because emancipation was the objective of that. It's not the Baptist War, it was the Emancipation Rebellion. And that's something Rastafari has taught me. Word sounds are important. Word sounds power. So we don't call our struggle uprising riot, because when we say something, just like I said, boy, I appreciate love something, You don't even want to say appreciate, because again, we're operating with the rules of the Jamaican language. So words are important. So this is it. I'm sorry we started late, so we couldn't give the full presentation, but the Q&A can serve as a space where we can deal with this, because this is not about just doing a lecture. This is about how can we forge a path to emancipation in Jamaica, in the Caribbean, in the Pan-African world. This is what this is all about.
So thank you so much, Ajamu, for such an provoking and eye-opening discussion. I'm sure that you have made numerous revolutionaries, and along that vein, I do have some comments from our audience online that I want to share before starting the question and answer. So we have Joan Richards, who stated that academia, arts, activism, quite powerful. We have Yaya Roots, who said greetings from Belize, solidarity forever. And Kamal Amen, who stated quite thought-provoking. Now, we do have an extensive one. This is again from Kamal, who states that Warren Buffett was one of the few wealthy persons in the United States who appreciated the class politics of a Bernie Sanders, amongst others. Somehow, though, the average person doesn't understand his point. Now, as I started the question and answer session, I see immediately my brother, Nolly Moses. Start Nolly and then Michael.
Hi, my name is Nolly Moses. I do a lot of things, but mostly I'm a writer. I've heard it. I appreciate all your wisdom, and your analysis is spot on, but I've heard it a lot before. In Jamaica, I was in Trinidad in the late 60s. I was in the US in the 70s. Like I said, I've been to the School of Vision and Light. And I'm still not seeing movement on all those things that you discussed, in all those ways of seeing things and of doing things. So what is the answer?
Yes, greetings. Name is Michael Barnett, for those who don't know. Yes, Ajamu, very provocative and stimulating lecture. But as you know well, that I am a protagonist in terms of not just looking at the dimension of class, but also the dimension of race. And we can bring in also the dimension of gender. So what I think tends to happen with a very Marxist approach is the emphasis tends to be on class at the loss of the dimension of race. And I put it to you that Walter Rodney, to me, also was very conscious about the importance of the racial dimension, and it's a dimension which, when we talk about reparations, is very important, because capitalism was twinned. The drive for capitalism was twinned with, I put it to you, the ethos, the ideology of racism, both twin powers that drove the transatlantic slave trade. It wasn't just a one-ticket deal. So Eric Williams was able to connect capitalism with slavery, but he did not also incorporate the racial motivation. That they chose Africans in particular to man the plantations and all of that. So in the reparations movement, I would like to think that you see people of African descent as very deserving of some compensation. I mean, holistically, and trying to avoid the class domination within the African race. But holistically, my perspective is the whole African race deserve reparation. So I'd like your perspectives on that. Give thanks.
Eric Williams points out in Capitalism and Slavery that the end of the indentureship for whites came about because whites were saying, how the hell are we treating indentured whites in near slavery just like the niggers? Then how can we justify racism as the ideological cover for this capital enterprise as slavery. And we're treating white people like how they're treating the enslaved Africans, even though they're indentured for a limited period, 5 years. They just say, no, we cannot. And he pointed to that. And when he was trying to show that the class elements, the need for capitalism, having access to a free African labor, a reliable, a regimented workforce, came about because of the needs of capitalism. Racism, as we know it, developed out of the capitalist enterprise called chattel slavery. But now, racism has its own independent existence, and even in how Europe underdeveloped Africa, Rodney addressed that at times in the United States, the way even the capitalist forces use racism, it's easy to believe that racism is more important than class. The racist things that they will do, because when a capitalist decides that, like in the US, where education is funded through the local tax base, not to push for adequate federal resources into education to overcome local economic disparities. The capitalists have been short-sighted because they are, not short-sighted, again, it's like an ableist term, but they're not looking at the racism is guiding their vision. Because at times they're saying, oh, we have to slow down the economy because we don't have enough trained workers. But you have workers, but they don't have access to the educational resources that will adequately prepare them to expand capitalist economic production. And because they want to keep wages low or are not opening up the society to more immigrants, they have to put a brake on economic expansion. So there are times when race would look like it's compelling. And remember when James said, that to think that race is more fundamental than race is like a crime against political commitment. But for the people who are saying race is subsidiary, him say they are even committing just as grave a crime as to say race is fundamental. Because racism is a very dangerous phenomenon. We experience it here. But when I think about reparations movement and reparations payment, I am thinking about reparations for the working class here in Jamaica. We don't need to wait on British payments for us to capitalize funds to provide to facilitate worker-owned businesses of the working class. We can demand that from the taxes. If we say that by the general consumption tax, 5% of it will go into a fund to capitalize, to prepare workers to collectively own their own business. That is possible. We can say that, okay, Appleton Estate, you're memorializing, exploiting African people, and as some of the petty bourgeois reparationists are, oh, Appleton Estate, you're doing a great thing, or Campari. I'm saying bullshit. Appleton Estate owns over 11,000 acres of land. Give half of that to a fund where we will follow the Rastafari principle, which is drawn an African principle, that land is not owned. Because Rastafari said the earth is the Lord. Not the earth is the Lord's, as in the Bible, but the earth is the Lord. How can you buy the Lord when the land is the Lord? God, free gift to humanity. African principles say we don't own land. We are the collective stewards of the land. And if I need this 4 acres, the community will deliberate and say, yes, use it for 50 years or until you expire. You don't own the land. So we can now, before we get reparations, start to use this principle of a right of use. Where if I'm a farmer and I need 10 acres of land, 10 acres are made available to me. I use it until I can't use them more. So there are things, cooperative housing. We can say, let's end this idea of private ownership of housing and turning housing into a capitalist commodity. We start to provide funding for cooperative housing where the people live in it manage the resources so other people who come after them can live in these houses. There are things that we can do today. But you see, because they don't have a class analysis, the people are peddling reparations, they're not pointing to the Caribbean governments and saying there are things that you can do that will dramatically improve the condition of the working class. You don't have to wait on reparations to do that. The reparation payment is to bring the African bourgeois up to a level where they can compete with the white and Asian bourgeoisie that dominate the economy and international capital. That's what these petty bourgeois actors are doing. And Rodney, like myself, would see the class basis for that. Brother, you're so correct. And that is why, for me, partially why I walk away from the academic plantation, is because we need to create examples of possibilities for the working class. I see in agriculture we can do something like that, agriculture, agro-tourism, where we can build worker-owned businesses. We can start to process products so we can reduce our dependence. Across the Anglophone Caribbean, we're spending over nearly $6 billion on imported food. In Jamaica, it's $1 billion. You know how much $1 billion could serve as a multiplier in Jamaican society? But I just don't simply want the bourgeois to get into farming like Michael Leachin, Azan over in Lakespen, where he's going to, when he finish build out his project, his farming project, he will be able to replace 17% of the imported thing, but Africans are going to be workers. I am saying that let's create worker-owned businesses in the farming sector where everybody working there is a worker member, or Americans like to use a worker owner. I don't like to use worker owner because I don't want to focus on ownership. I want to focus on the worker control. The worker manage and control capital, not capital controlling labor. These are things that we can do, and that's why the organizing approach to liberation is better, because we can organize the people on a 24/7 basis to wage struggle against oppression. We can create programs, projects, and institutions that models the future society that we're fighting. And it will still be a part of the class struggle and the class war against capitalism. Because for me, I am not shying away from that we're in a class war. I want to wage war on our class enemies. We want to put them out of business. No, I was born in 1965. Oh, Marley. I'm not aware of that. I'm not aware of them. I haven't seen anything of a link between them. Because again, Bob Marley was also kind of suspicious of Marxists. Like people.
So I want to thank Dr. Plummer so much for her calm disposition in sharing the session. I want to thank you, the audience, the online audience, with their questions, and the audience here, face-to-face audience, for your silence, okay, while you were listening. And we hope that what was said tonight will germinate a seed for many of us who are very comfortable on the plantation, right? And very comfortable with capitalism. That is capitalism really our friend? Something to think about, as I'm sure Walter Rodney also hinted at, and his life and the very tragedy of his circumstances here at Mona is something that we probably really can't talk about. It's probably too late to talk about that now. But just want to thank you so very much for your attendance here. Want to thank also Brian for the streaming service maintenance. Thank also Dr. Dennis Howard for not singing, but for the introduction. And thank all of us. So let's all give a big hand, everybody.